I just made an insane Titan build that gives you your super in 20 seconds. So if you want to learn how to do that while gaining an insane amount of transcendent energy, weapon, and health buffs without requiring an exotic class item, then make sure to watch till the end of the video. So without further ado, let's get straight into the build. Now before we go any further, the first thing that you need is Doomfang Pauldrons. Now these were pretty popular back in year 1 of Destiny 2 because of its ability to gain a tremendous amount of super energy when getting void melee kills. And Sentinel Shield was pretty good back in the day, but not so much anymore. But fast forward to today, and we have a lot more options than we did back then. On top of its original functionality from launch, it also got a buff over the years. That being that defeating targets with void damage have a chance to grant bonus damage to your void weapons, and this is basically the void surge up to ×4, which is a 25% damage buff. But enough glazing this exotic, let's move on to the actual subclass itself. And starting off with the super, we're going to be using Twilight Arsenal. Now to be honest, you can really use anything that you want. I personally just enjoy using Twilight Arsenal as it has the lowest cooldown out of all the supers, and it's pretty fun to use. Next is a class ability, and you can really use anything that you want. I'm using Thruster because it has the shortest cooldown, and I like popping that a lot because of reasons that I'm going to mention a bit later. For the jump, it doesn't really matter as well, but for the melee, we are of course going to use the throwing shield. Now because it is a void melee, we're going to be getting our super a lot, alongside with a void overshield and getting radiant, which I will mention a bit later. Now for the grenade, I really recommend using either shackle grenade or a glacier nade, since in content that's a little bit harder, the shackle grenade will be quite nice and you have a better chance of getting the kill with the throwing shield, and this will also help us get some darkness transcendence energy. Now for the first aspect, we're going to be using knockout. Now this is pretty self-explanatory as to why, but this will basically restore health when you get a kill, get amplified, and increase our melee damage and range for a short time after breaking an enemy shield or killing them. Now you might be saying that throwing shield doesn't really need more range because it's a projectile, but if you didn't know, once you have knockout procced, your normal melee is now counted as a powered arc melee, which will also help us get orbs, get super energy even when we don't have our actual throwing shield up, and do more damage to darkness debuff targets since it's counted as a light melee ability, which I'll get into how in a couple of seconds. The next aspect is going to be Diamond Lance, as basically whenever we get an ability kill, it's going to drop one. And it also helps us work towards the Darkness Transcendence energy. Now moving on to the fragments, the first one I'm going to go over is Facet of Purpose. Basically picking up an orb will give us our survivability tool based on the super that we have equipped. Since I have Twilight Arsenal, we're going to get a Void Overshield. But if you chose anything else like Sunbreaker, you're going to get Restoration, or if you chose Berserker, you'll get Woven Mail. Next up is going to be Facet of Courage. Your Arc, Solar, and Void abilities deal increased damage to targets afflicted with darkness debuffs. The main purpose of this is, as I mentioned before, when you get into a little bit harder of content, it might be a little harder to kill things with your throwing shield. So the Suspend Grenade is counted as a darkness debuff alongside the Diamond Lance being stasis, and hitting anything with throwing shield will get us a guaranteed chunk of super energy. And on top of that, if we don't have our throwing shield, we can simply use our knockout punch since it counts as an arc melee being light, and our punch will do more damage. Then for the next one, it's Facet of Balance, where rapidly defeating targets with light damage grants melee energy, and honestly that's the main purpose we're using this, because spoiler alert, a big premise of the build is our melee, and we have quite a bit of light damage in our kit, being our weapons and our abilities. Then for the fourth fragment, we're using Facet of Sacrifice, where when we have a light buff, we gain bonus Darkness Transcendence energy. We will always have Radiant or Void Overshield, so when we throw that Suspend Grenade or our Diamond Lance, we're gonna gain a humongous chunk of Darkness Transcendence energy. And then for our final fragment, we're using Facet of Dawn, where powered melee hits grant us Radiant, and powered melee final blows will give us and nearby allies Radiant. Honestly, this is the most interchangeable one, and if you want to switch it out because the artifact mod gives us Radiant for free just picking up orbs, feel free to do so. Now for the weapons of choice, I found that Buried Bloodline is pretty goated for this build, as if we get rapid final blows, we get Devour, and Devour keeps us alive and gives us grenade energy, and on top of that, if you have the Catalyst, you also weaken targets when you have Devour active. Besides that, the other weapons can just be some void weapon. For the helmet, I really recommend double hands-on, as you can gain more super energy on melee kills. This not only works for your regular melee, but since knockout makes your melee arc, this also counts towards that. Also run a Void Siphon because we're running Void weapons. For the arm, just run a melee kickstart so that when you do throw your shield, you can get a chunk of energy back. Momentum transfer so that when you hit something with your grenade, you get melee energy back. And then a heavy-handed so that you get an orb on melee kills. For the chest, it doesn't really matter. For the legs, stacks on stacks so we get more charges when we pick up an orb. And then for the other two mods, it's kind of a toss-up. I like using Void Scavenger just to get more ammo when I pick up bricks, but you could just run double invigoration so that when you do pick up an orb, you get more melee energy back. So we're gonna run a Reaper mod on the mark so that when we dodge and get a kill, we make an orb. Powerful attraction so that when we do use our class ability, we can pick up the orbs. And then an outreach so that also when we pop a class ability, we get melee energy even more. This is how I have my artifact set up. I would say Shield Crush is the most important since when we have Frost Armor, Woven Mail, or a Void Overshield, our melee recharges quicker. Now that I've showed you everything, let me tell you how it works. The main focuses of the build are either Buried Bloodline or your melee. You can start off with a Throwing Shield to start your super gains, or you can pump people with your Buried Bloodline, get Devour, while also making some orbs from your Void Siphon, pop your class ability, gather them, get your armor charges, expend your melee, shoot your Buried Bloodline, or even punch them since your melees will now do arc damage and either your Void Shield or your melee should have spawned a Diamond Lance, and then you can throw the Diamond Lance at your enemy and punch them with your arc melee and you're gonna do more damage to them since they're frozen. Plus, since we have Facet of Dawn, hitting them with this arc melee will make us radiant as well, and by this time you should have enough Transcendence energy from using your Throwing Shield, Buried Bloodline, and for the darkness with the Suspend and the Diamond Lance. And honestly, the point of Transcendence is if you're really impatient like me and you spam all of your abilities at once and you want it back immediately. Popping this will just give you your shield back so you can throw it again if they're still not dead. And since we're in Transcendence, we get increased regen in our abilities, and more shields means more supers, and getting rapid super final blows means more melees. So you can kind of see how crazy this build is, and since Buried Bloodline gives us Devour, we get grenade energy, which also helps us with getting our melee energy because of momentum transfer on our arms. So yeah, everything's about this melee and the super, and my god, I've had a lot of fun with this. But if you want to try this build out yourself, I'll have a dim link to the build down below so you can just put it on immediately. But if you feel like this build is missing something, let me know down in the comments below what you kind of tweaked about it and what you added. Like the video to help a brother out, and subscribe to the channel if you liked videos like this. I have a couple of Hunter, Titan, and Warlock build videos on the channel that aren't like the ones you've seen before. And with all that being said, take care of yourself, take care of each other. Peace and love, baby.